someone mentioned this concept that I'd not heard of previously called a post-truth society, in which it's possible to assert things that have no factual basis. People will criticize it, fact checkers, and it makes no difference whatsoever that people will keep asserting it, and then other, large numbers of people will keep believing it, even if it's not true.
Hey, did you guys hear about all this fake news? Did you hear about all this false stuff being put online? Isn't it crazy that people tell lies on the internet? Were you aware of that? That people will tell lies for media coverage? Did you know that websites will push whatever narrative they want because they're designed to reinforce political positions as opposed to inform people, and they only really seem unbiased to people who already believe everything they say? It's pretty crazy, right? This is an interesting turn of events that kind of vindicates everything I've been saying on this channel for a decent amount of time. You're starting to hear things like fake news, post-truth, and post-factual thrown around on various online publications as well as cable news programs. You tend to hear it from everyone because everyone at every moment of the day thinks that they haven't been lied to and have a way to get the real story. Sometimes that real story is encased on an extremely obscure blog that bashes the mainstream media and then proceeds to bullshit them for the rest of the article. Or that real story could be from cable news, because who else are we to trust? Some random guy on the internet? The idea that we live in a post-truth era is the hottest and sexiest new buzzword in town, and it's being lapped up and used, predictably, to disparage political opponents. The first use of post-truth was used in an essay by Steve Tessich, which reads as follows, quote, "We are rapidly becoming prototypes of a people that totalitarian monsters could only drool about in their dreams. All the dictators up to now have had to work hard at suppressing the truth. We, by our actions, are saying that this is no longer necessary, that we have acquired a spiritual mechanism that can denude truth of any significance. In a very fundamental way, we, as a free people, have freely decided that we want to live in some post-truth world." Unquote. So this idea of post-truth is nothing really new. It's been around for decades, and I definitely sympathize with these words if we were speaking objectively and not speaking in the midst of a political polemic. The ever-accusatory post-truth term has been leveled recently due to the referendum on Brexit and the election of Donald Trump. These accusers are all too willing to forget that calling someone a bigot simply because they may have a fact or two wrong is not exactly the best way to convince them. But I do think it's true that the average person doesn't much care for the truth, at least when it cuts against what they believe in. This is why appeals to the truth are met with accusations of being aloof and above it all. There's a mountain of difference between having factual problems with something and having political problems with something. This conflation is, however, crammed down your throat whenever you open your mouth to speak. Citing the facts when someone has a political problem is not going to be an effective convincing tool, and citing the political implications is not going to convince someone who has an issue with the factual basis for the position. This cramming has consequences, though, and so does untruth in general. The truth always seems to have some sort of curtain in front of it, whether it be an educational barrier or a barrier imposed by people who don't think the truth is always convenient, and would instead like to draw it or sheath it whenever their hearts desire. Now that this is out of the way, I think it's important that we go over a few great moments in the history of the interview.
Started to cry, pushed my chair back, and then I blurted it out. And I said, "I'm sorry. I just hope I haven't let you down." Well, when I said, "I just hope I haven't let you down," that said it all. I had. I let down my friends. I let down the country. I let down our system of government and the dreams of all those young people that ought to get into government but will think it's all too corrupt and the rest.
This was one of the most beautiful moments in the history of journalism, when an interviewer indirectly got power to speak truth to itself. It nearly brings a tear to my eye every time I watch it. In 1977, 3 years after Nixon's resignation from office, David Frost got Nixon to apologize to the American people for all of his blunders. Although he may not have directly admitted to a lot of things, one has the feeling that the curtain opened slightly during this interview. It was the truth poking its head out from the tornado of dirty politics, and you see a very human moment from Nixon. I can't read Nixon's mind, so I can't tell you whether it was genuine or not, but that's another story. In the end, we're all governed by other human beings, the people who run things, either in the government, in traditional media, or even those who have large followings on social media, aren't much different than your average person in personality, or even in intelligence. If you familiarize yourself with books by folks like Bob Woodward, such as State of Denial, you can get access to private conversations between political figures, and you can see just how different they are from the masks they put on in front of the public. This point isn't new or even particularly insightful, but I think it's important to note that the face politicians put on for the camera, even their entire demeanor, personality, and expressed values can be, and often is, a lie. There appears to be a sentiment floating around political circles that in order to make a decent critique of a politician, one must stick to their policies, and that annoys me. It's one of those things that people say to self-aggrandize but don't actually believe in practice. It worries me in a sense because there are so many things to be concerned with in a president apart from policy. Correct me if I'm wrong, but whether a politician is easily corrupted by power and money does not fall under the bracket of policy. Yet I still consider that a reasonable criticism, provided there's evidence to back it up. The Iran-Contra scandal was not official policy. The Watergate scandal was not official policy. Bill Clinton lying to Congress was not official policy. The Clinton Foundation taking money from foreign governments was not official policy. Nor are most major scandals worthy of being brought to light. And I'm not talking scandals like a wayward, racially charged joke among friends being leaked and people bursting into hysterics. Scandals normally don't come packaged as marketed policy, and the official mask of the politician won't bear the weight of that scandal without being forced to. The relationship between the government, the journalistic profession, and the truth has always been somewhat of a triple threat cage match. Both of them appear to fight the truth when it bears down on them. I don't know about you, but I know which fighter I root for in every single case. Every single bit of truth matters, and should be pursued for its own sake, not used as a weapon of convenience by governments, by journalistic outlets, or the average citizen. Now for the fun part. Let's go over an incident where a politician desperately attempts to keep the curtain up after it's been viciously ripped apart already.
I was entitled to express my views. I was entitled to be consulted.
Did you threaten to overrule
I
him?
was not entitled to instruct Derek Lewis, and I did not instruct him. And
Did you threaten to overrule
the
him?
truth of the matter is that Mr. Marriott was not suspended.
Did you
I did
threaten
not
to overrule him?
I did not overrule Derek
Did you
Lewis.
threaten to overrule him?
I took advice on what I could or could not
Did
do.
you threaten
and
to
I
overrule him,
acted
Mr. Howard?
scrupulously in accordance with that advice. I did not overrule Derek
you
Lewis.
threaten to overrule
Mr.
him?
Marriott was not suspended.
Did you threaten to overrule him?
I have accounted for my decision to dismiss Derek Lewis
Did you threaten
in
to
great
overrule him?
detail before the House of Commons.
I note you're not answering the question whether you threatened to overrule him.
The important aspect of this, which it's very clear to bear in mind...
I'm sorry, I'm going to be
is
frightfully
this.
rude, but...
Yes, you
but
can...
I'm sorry. It's
you
a quite
can put-
straight
you
yes
can
or
put the
no.
question and I
It's a
will
straight
give
yes or
you-
no
I will give you an
Did you
answer.
threaten to overrule him?
I discussed this matter with Derek Lewis. I gave him the benefit of my opinion. I gave him the benefit of my opinion in strong language. But I did not instruct him because I was not entitled to instruct him. I was entitled to express my opinion, and that is what I did.
With respect, that is not answering the question of whether you threatened to overrule him.
It's dealing with the relevant point, which is what I was entitled to do and what I was not entitled to do. And I have dealt with this in detail before the House of Commons and before the Select Committee.
With respect, you haven't answered the question of whether you threatened to overrule him.
Well, you see, the question is, what was I entitled to do and what was I not entitled to do? I was not entitled to instruct him, and I did not do that.
The person being interviewed has given us the answer to the question. He did threaten to overrule him. Why else would he be dodging the question? If I sit there and ask you, did you steal from me? And you answer, well, steal is such a loaded phrase, and by the confines of the law, stealing is illegal. Yes, but did you steal from me? Stealing is not something that I'm entitled to do under the law of this nation. Yes, but did you steal from me? The true question is whether I'm allowed to steal, and by every conceivable measure I am not. Yes, but did you steal from me? I mean, define stealing. I've already dealt with this. I've been discussing this matter with you for ages. One can see how the truth is being hidden in this instance. You'd have to be an idiot to not recognize that the answer is very clearly yes. There'd be no reason to obfuscate like that and refuse to give a simple no answer unless no is not the answer. Vagueness assists in these matters and gives plausible deniability to everyone who refuses to deal with specifics or give any definitive answer ever. Because if this person were to give a yes or no answer, it would be checked, and if they lied and said no, they'd not only be cut out for threatening to overrule or stealing, but also for lying. Hey, politicians, a simple yes will suffice. Thank you. We're not morons, okay? But hey, what does all of this have to do with post-truth, you might be asking yourself? Well, these clips are to point out that we've always been drowning in post-truth. We've always been swimming in a sea of ideological conflict, distorting things to suit agendas. This didn't arise with Brexit and Trump, and to act like we've suddenly been dropped into this hurricane of people believing untrue things is an act of post-truthing in itself. People throughout history have believed all kinds of dumb things, stupid things, wrong things, crazy things, weird things. That's not new. And people will nearly always double down instead of conceding. It seems to be part of the human condition for half of the brain to know something is wrong and yet have the other half cling to it like a punctured lifeboat. Whoops, my mistake, is the scariest phrase for people in a mental struggle, and so they just never say it, even when they've made a mistake. Now, one would think this is something I could rant about until my entire face fell off, and I certainly could, but I've ranted about this in previous videos, and I'd just be repeating myself. The truth is something I value immensely. If it isn't the most important value to me, it certainly is in the top 3. I just don't like seeing truth tossed around like a cheap hooker, and I think more and more people are getting fed up with it. Honesty is the best policy. This is something we should be learning as children and carrying on to adulthood in order to make this world a better place. We can't make the world a better place if we can't even figure out what the world is in the first place. The truth always ends up taking a backseat to political goals and ego. Here's something from Orwell's Diaries, written in 1942. Quote, "From the Italian radio, describing life in London. 5 shillings were given for 1 egg yesterday, and £1 for a kilogram of potatoes. Rice has disappeared, even from the black market, and peas have become the prerogative of millionaires. There is no sugar on the market, although small quantities are still to be found at prohibitive prices." One would say that this is stupid propaganda, because if such conditions really existed, England would stop fighting in a few weeks. And when this fails to happen, the listener is bound to see that he's been deceived. But in fact, there's no such reaction. You can go on and on telling lies, and the most palpable lies at that, and even if they're not actually believed, there's no strong revulsion either. We are all drowning in filth. When I talk to anyone or read the writings of anyone who has any axe to grind, I feel that intellectual honesty and balanced judgment have simply disappeared from the face of the earth. Everyone's thought is forensic. Everyone is simply putting a case with deliberate suppression of his opponent's point of view, and, what is more, with complete insensitiveness to any sufferings except those of himself and his friends. The Indian nationalist is sunken in self-pity and hatred of Britain, and utterly indifferent to the miseries of China. The English pacifist works himself up into frenzies about the concentration camps in the Isle of Man, and forgets about those in Germany, etc., etc. One notices this in the case of people one disagrees with, such as fascists or pacifists, but in fact, everyone is the same. At least everyone is utterly heartless towards people who are outside the immediate range of his own interests. What is most striking of all is the way sympathy can be turned on and off like a tap, according to political expediency." Unquote. If one thinks about it now, one imagines that the Second World War was one of the easiest decisions the United States made, and how opposition to it was slim at the time, but in reality nothing was more controversial, at least before Pearl Harbor. We've always operated this way. We argue, we bitch, we demonize, we lie, we distort the world around us in order to get what we want. Depending on the situation, everything has a hidden meaning. Nothing just means what it actually means. If someone you generally disagree with says something reasonable, clearly they're only doing it to puff up their image. If someone you generally agree with says something terrible, they probably just had an off day or didn't actually mean what they've said. Politicians act like politicians, journalists act like politicians, and even the average citizen acts like a politician. I just don't see why people can't be more honest. They will be found out, and all they do is hurt their reputation and misdirect others to potentially disastrous ends. So at the risk of sounding like some pretentious douchebag, as if that hasn't been tried already, be honest with people. And since much of the world won't, we'll be right back where we started, won't we? Various movements and ad campaigns like to try and co-opt the truth as if it belongs to them, like the Truth anti-smoking campaign and the 9/11 Truthers movement, no matter how much the truth is abused along the way. The truth is beautiful by itself. It doesn't need your help. Not every single fact is going to be beautiful, but accepting uncomfortable facts is the only way to properly deal with them. Yet some people are in the business of manufacturing uncomfortable facts and pretending to face them so you'll follow in their wakes. I'm going to read you the last bit of Orwell's diary entry now, just to really cap this point off. Quote, "All the pinks, or most of them, who flung themselves to and fro in their rage about Nazi atrocities before the war, forgot all about these atrocities and obviously lost their sympathy with the Jews, etc. as soon as the war began to bore them. Ditto with people who hated Russia like poison up to June 22nd, 1941, and then suddenly forgot about the purges, the GPU, etc. the moment Russia came into the war. I'm not thinking of lying for political ends, but of actual changes in subjective feeling. But is there no one who has both firm opinions and a balanced outlook? Actually, there are plenty, but they are all powerless. All power is in the hands of paranoiacs." Unquote. In conclusion, dear media, news, politicians, and people in general who want to tout around the idea that we were all dropped into a post-truth world simply because you didn't get what you wanted politically, no, that isn't true. We've always lived in a post-truth world, and you were all too happy to contribute to the abuse of the truth the moment you thought you could get away with it. Now, what are you going to do about it? Have a wonderful day.
Robert McElvain is a professor of history at Millsaps College, a columnist also at the Huffington Post, and he's been writing a lot about Russia in recent days, and he joins us now. Professor, thanks for coming on.
Glad to be with you.
I want to quote something you wrote just a couple days ago that I read in the Huffington Post. You say, and I'm quoting, "There is substantial evidence that Russia stole the election for Donald Trump." What is that evidence that they stole the election?
Well, first of all, I do not go beyond Keith Olbermann. In fact, a lot of that is certainly hyperbole. But when people say that whatever Russia did clearly didn't affect the election, that's ridiculous. We hardly ever hear mentioned in the media that Hillary Clinton won by 2.8 million votes in the real vote. The three states that put Trump over the top in the Electoral College was by a total of a little over 80,000 votes. And if anyone thinks that what the Russians were doing in terms of the emails that were released through WikiLeaks intended to damage Hillary, and they obviously did to a great extent, were not enough to get 80,000 votes moved in the direction of Trump away from Hillary. I don't know what they're thinking. Obviously,
okay, well, but hold on. Let's just. I want to get back to what you wrote. You wrote something very specific. I'm going to read it to you again in case you don't remember writing it. There is substantial evidence that Russia stole the election for Donald Trump. I'm not contesting it was a close election. I'm, of course, familiar with the numbers. How did Russia steal the election? Please be precise.
The way I just said, by doing things that were intended to help him and to hurt Hillary Clinton. I don't think initially that was